All right, so we're in here. Gonna give the video a chance to load. Yeah, I'm gonna do something a little different. Talk about sports quickly. Just some things that were on my mind as far as the NBA. There was recently some teeth to teeth between Draymond Green of the Golden State Warriors and Cornbread Maxwell, a former NBA star for the Boston Celtics. He, for those who don't know Cornbread, he helped lead UNC Charlotte to the Final Four back in the 1970s. Extremely hard to lead UNC Charlotte to the Final Four, I'll put it that way. And he was one of the first point forwards out there, a guy who is a forward who can handle the ball like a guard. And you don't get the name Cornbread Maxwell unless you can play basketball. For years, I didn't know what his name was. I just called him Cornbread. Everybody called him Cornbread Maxwell. And so there was recently some goings on between him and Draymond Green, where I think it's just been a lot of really a lot of back and forth between some of the former players and some of the players today, and it's kind of silly where players are today. I mean, former players are critiquing what, not even critiquing, just making comments, which is their job, to make comments on what current players are doing today. And the current players are taking it seriously, taking it like personal. They're getting personal and making these snarky comments about the former players who basically built the league. So, in my opinion, it's gotten absolutely silly, and there's no reason for all the drama with the current players and the former players. But the current players tend to get real personal for some reason, and Draymond Green in particular tends to get really personal when it comes to anybody critiquing him. So I'm just gonna. I think Gary Payton and Cornbread Maxwell were talking about the NBA Finals and some of the Draymond's antics where he's been flopping, setting moving screens, just doing a lot of non-basketball plays, knocking players down and just falling on top of them and trying to get a reaction from the players and trying to get them to start a fight or get a flagrant foul. It's just kind of goofy. A lot of non-basketball plays and just gotten, real silly. Almost like the WWF. I think someone asked Cedric Maxwell, I think Gary Payton asked Cedric Maxwell what would happen to Draymond Green if he pulled those antics when he was playing. And Cedric Maxwell said that Draymond Green would have got knocked out, and Draymond heard about it and responded. So I'm going to share my screen and show a clip of the back and forth between Cornbread Maxwell and Draymond Green.
Discussing what would have happened to Draymond Green if he played in the 80s and tried to pull off his shenanigans. Turns out Green saw that video, and today he responded to Maxwell.
I saw what Cedric Maxwell said. And, one thing that baffles me about the 80s or the 90s or whatever you want to call when basketball was so much more physical is some of the guys that be talking weren't the guys that was punching people. Like they act like, guys was just walking around the court like I'm hitting this guy in the nose. There were a few guys back then that would lay you out, that would knock you out, that would foul you and get thrown out the game. Bill Laimbeer, Rick Mahorn, but everybody running around acting like they were that. Y'all were getting bullied.
Max,
that's really interesting that he pick out a name like Rick Mahorn. And he would pick out, I think, more than anybody, he goes on and said, Bill Laimbeer. Didn't we see Bill Laimbeer get beat down in front of us in the Garden with Robert Parrish out there?
Right.
And you can talk about the 80s all you want. It's not about me and him. Here's this punch, and I'm over here. I'm trying to grab Charles Barkley by the neck. I'm putting him in the chokehold. This is a physicality of a game. Okay, let's see this one. Wait a minute. Rick Lambert's intimidated. Yeah, boom, boom, boom. Yeah, and then I asked Robert Parrish, I said, Robert, did you see anybody? Oh, man, that makes me sick right now. James Worthy pushed me back. But that was all right because we have one more game to play. It was fine. And this is still in litigation. I hope that white man is still alive. I'm not sure. But that was a whole nother thing that my teammates looked at. And I asked Robert Parrish about this punch. And I said, Robert, weren't you afraid that other players are going to come over and attack you? He said, I was thinking about that. But that's what they thought about him. Then they would beat him down. So I don't worry about all these things. And again, it's not about Draymond Green and I, but I was just pointing out, in the 80s, there were some guys like Kermit Washington, there was Akeem Olajuwon, there were a bunch of guys who were mean, tough guys. And a lot of the shenanigans that's going on in the game right now with Draymond, that wouldn't have been tolerated during the 80s. Gary Payton, he identified, he said that.
And also, but the retaliations wouldn't have been, in Philadelphia, Max, when you went and hit that fan, we just showed the video. Were you even thrown out of the game or did you keep playing?
Came back and started playing in the game. It was that's it. Just break it up, guys. Let's go for it. There was no rule then, Felder. There was a Cedric Maxwell rule that was out there about going in the stands later on. But at that time, went in the stands, gave the guy a little forearm shiver, came back in, said some choice words, and went on and started playing in the game. Okay, so that's the toughness of the game. Well, it's completely different.
If someone did that now, they'd be suspended for the rest of the year and fined $10 million. So
that's really true, and it's more again about that situation. I understand what Draymond's saying, but you keep saying about nobody punched nobody. You asked Charles Barkley what happened when he and I got in a fight down in Golden State when I was in L.A. with the Clippers. Norm Nixon happened to look at that thing. He calls me all the time and said, you know what, I'll testify, and I'll say you punched him a couple of times. So, look, I've been in enough of those. So Draymond wasn't even born when I was around playing, was he? Let me see. Let me do the math here.
Max, don't get
Draymond, ask your daddy who I was, okay? That's how.
Wow. So basically, Cornbread Maxwell mentioned and asked for Draymond to ask his daddy who he was, which is the Cornbread Maxwell I remember. Cornbread Maxwell, ML Carr, Larry Bird, these guys were some of the biggest trash talkers, and you got really heated between the Celtics and the Philadelphia 76ers and the LA Lakers back in the 80s. That's a Cornbread Maxwell I remember. But a few things. Every time someone critiques Draymond Green, he always makes a straw man argument. Always starts talking about, in this example, he started talking about how it was different in the 80s versus the rules were different today versus the 1980s and 1970s, which is true, which has nothing to do with the point. The point is Cornbread Maxwell was making that he would have got knocked out doing that nonsense, which is true. And he always, and Draymond Green pivots to the rules are different back then. Or he'll pivot to, I make $25 million. I make more money than you do. We start talking about how much money he makes. And he'll talk about the rings. As a clown back, I got 3 rings and you don't. He particularly told that to Charles Barkley, who Draymond Green couldn't carry Charles Barkley's jockstrap. The facts. And nobody was going to win a ring during the Michael Jordan era. It just wasn't going to happen. But he would clown back at Charles Barkley saying, you don't have a ring, Charles. And they tend to only say it to black men in the NBA. Tend to say it to Charles Barkley, including Draymond Green and the former players, current former players, say it to maybe Charles Barkley, Patrick Ewing, Karl Malone, those type of guys as a way of, ponying them or putting them in their place. They never say it to, white men in the NFL, for instance. They never say it to Archie Manning or Dan Fouts. Could you imagine if a commentator said that Archie Manning's career, who was a stud at for the New Orleans Saints, his career was irrelevant because he didn't win a ring? If you said that on Sunday night, you'd be frying fish by Monday morning. It wouldn't be allowed. The media wouldn't allow it, nor should they, but they allow you to say it to people like Charles Barkley and Patrick Ewing and Karl Malone and Dominique Wilkins. The other thing is that Draymond Green scored 2 points in the previous NBA Finals game, in Game 3 of the NBA Finals. He's irrelevant. Why even talk about this guy? I know the media likes to talk about him because he's always quotable and he's always gets website hits and a lot of activity around his videos and articles related to Draymond Green, but he's irrelevant as far as basketball is concerned. There's so many other players that they could be talking about who actually scored more than 2 points in the NBA Finals. His antics gotten kind of silly because it's all antics and not production anymore, and it's sort of a waste of time even talking about Draymond Green, in my opinion. So I think it's a waste of time for Cornbread Maxwell, Gary Payton, or anybody in the media to even interview this guy or talk to him about anything other than anything basketball related. But I thought it was pretty interesting how Cornbread Maxwell and these guys view the current game. They created the current game that created a pathway for people like Draymond Green to make $25 million. So they should be thanking people like Cornbread Maxwell and showing some type of reverence to them. But that's my take. So that's basically Cornbread Maxwell uses Draymond and your daddy in a sentence. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye.